Please, Grandma, just sign this page. It's nothing serious. My granddaughter's voice was coated with sugar, like when she was little and begged me for ice cream on hot summer afternoons. But now she was 42 years old, and her hand pressed mine onto the paper, while her partner, Marcus, clamped his fingers around my shoulder so tightly that it ached. We were sitting in a financial office, people walking past us with files and briefcases, no one realizing that I was seconds away from losing everything I had left. My chest pounded, my throat burned, and I knew this wasn't a favor. It was theft wrapped in sweet words. It was betrayal disguised as love. My name is Eleanor Harris. I am 82 years old, and for most of my life I believed that love meant giving until it hurt. That morning, when Alicia called me, her tone carried urgency and charm. Grandma, we just need you to come to the office. Sign a quick form. It's routine. You don't even have to think twice. I didn't suspect her. I wore my gray cardigan. The one Samuel used to say made me look gentle and calm, and tucked my glasses into my purse. I thought it was going to be something small, maybe paperwork for Alicia's new job or school enrollment for her son. But as soon as I walked into the office, Marcus greeted me with a grin, too polished to be sincere. His suit was sharp, but his eyes those cold, calculating eyes studied me like I was a bank vault waiting to be cracked. When I sat down, the truth screamed from the papers. It wasn't a simple form. It was a transfer of every cent I had, $60,000. Money I had guarded since Samuel's death 7 years earlier. My body froze. I remembered those nights Samuel and I had shared bowls of soup because groceries had to last until payday. The years he carried mail through snowstorms to keep the mortgage paid. The Saturdays I sold pies at the community fair just so Alicia could join her dance team. Now, the little girl whose feet I had tied ballet slippers onto was across from me, urging me to hand over my entire future. The office buzzed with normalcy, printers clattering, staplers snapping, shoes clicking against tile floors. Yet I felt isolated, as if I were sinking underwater. Alicia leaned closer, her perfume cloying, her smile staged for the security cameras. Grandma, trust me, she whispered. You don't need this money. We'll take care of you. Each word was a dagger wrapped in silk. Marcus's hand dug deeper into my shoulder, forcing a wince out of me. He bent down, his breath sour with cigarettes. Don't make this messy, old lady, he murmured through a frozen smile. I looked around. The clerk at the counter was buried in files. A man in a blue tie scrolled on his phone. A woman adjusted her heels while reading a brochure. None of them saw what was happening, how I was being robbed in broad daylight with polite words and fake affection. My hand shook as I picked up the pen, the ink waiting like a guillotine to cut through my last safety net. And then, like a sudden ray of light, the branch manager appeared. Mr. Daniels, a tall man with gray at his temples, approached with a professional smile. Is everything all right here? He asked. My pulse jumped, my breath caught. Maybe, just maybe, this was my chance, Mr. Daniels's question floated above the table like a lifeline, and I wanted so badly to grab it, to cry out that nothing was all right, that my granddaughter and her husband were trying to strip me of the last measure of security I had left in this world. But fear kept my lips sealed, fear and the pressure of Marcus's hands still heavy on my shoulder. I glanced up at Mr. Daniels and forced a smile, though I knew my eyes betrayed the storm raging inside me. Alicia chimed in quickly, her tone syrupy sweet. Oh yes, everything's fine. My grandmother just gets nervous with paperwork. She's not used to dealing with these things. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. The lie rolled off her tongue effortlessly, the same way she used to lie when she was a child and swore she hadn't stolen cookies from the jar. Back then it was harmless. Now, it was venomous. But before I tell you what happened in that office, you need to understand how I ended up in this chair, trembling under the weight of my granddaughter's betrayal. I was born in 1943, in a small town in Alabama, the third of 6 children. My father worked as a janitor at the local courthouse, and my mother sewed clothes for neighbors to make ends meet. We never had much, but we had discipline and faith, and those were the values I carried into my adult life. When I met Samuel, I was 20 years old and working as a teacher's aide at the elementary school. He was a postal worker, tall, quiet, with a smile that could calm any storm. We married in the spring of 1965, a modest ceremony in the church basement with borrowed flowers and a cake baked by my older sister. We promised each other that even if we had little, we would always share, always protect one another. For nearly 5 decades we kept that promise. Samuel worked long shifts at the post office, his hands rough from carrying heavy bags of mail through snow and rain, while I built a career as a nurse's assistant at the community clinic. The work was hard, the pay small, but we lived within our means, saving every penny we could for the future. When Alicia was born, our only granddaughter, after our 2 sons had long since moved away, my heart melted. I still remember the day her mother placed her in my arms, tiny and red-faced, her fingers curling tightly around mine as if she already knew I belonged to her. From that day on, Alicia became the center of my world. We sacrificed constantly so that she could have opportunities. When she was 9, she begged to join a local gymnastics program. The fees were more than we could comfortably afford, but Samuel and I tightened our belts, cutting back on heating that winter and sewing up old coats instead of buying new ones. At 15, Alicia wanted to travel with her school choir to New York City. She cried on the phone, pleading that she would be the only one left behind if she couldn't go. I pawned a bracelet my mother had given me, the only piece of jewelry I had ever cherished, to make that trip possible. Each time, I told myself it was worth it. Seeing her smile, hearing her laughter, it was enough payment for my weary bones. But with each sacrifice, Alicia grew bolder. By the time she turned 20, she had learned that all she needed to do was look at me with those wide eyes, speak with that trembling voice, and I would find a way to give her college tuition drained, a savings account Samuel and I had spent decades building. When she married Marcus, she insisted on a lavish ceremony with chandeliers and champagne fountains, something her friends would envy. The cost was astronomical, $35,000, but she convinced me it was an investment in her happiness. Samuel argued that we couldn't afford it, that our retirement years were approaching fast. But when Alicia broke down crying in our living room, I caved. I told Samuel we'd manage somehow, and I handed her a check that emptied half of what we had left. Marcus, from the beginning, never sat right with me. He was charming on the surface, but his eyes always seemed to linger on wallets, on possessions, on the size of someone's car. When he shook my hand at their engagement dinner, he leaned too close and asked if our house was paid off. Not how I was doing, not what I liked to do with my time. I should have recognized the danger then, but I brushed it aside. After all, Alicia was happy, and her happiness had always been my compass. Years passed, and their requests never stopped. A broken car, a failed business venture, new furniture for their home. It was always something urgent, something that required me to rescue them. And like a fool, I did. Each dollar I handed over carried pieces of my health, of my future, of Samuel's and my dreams for our twilight years. When Samuel fell ill with heart complications, the cost of his treatment ate into what little remained. I begged Alicia to contribute, but she said Marcus was between jobs, that they couldn't afford it. I shouldered it alone until the day Samuel's heart gave out, and I held his hand as he slipped away. After the funeral, I found myself staring at empty cupboards and empty accounts, saved only by the insurance payout of $60,000. I swore to myself then that I would guard that money, that I would never allow anyone to take advantage of me again. And yet, here I was, years later, seated in that office, watching Alicia and Marcus plot to strip me of the last lifeline I had. Mr. Daniels's presence sparked something inside me, a flicker of courage I thought I had lost. My palms sweated as I considered the impossible, asking for help, admitting out loud what was happening. Mr. Daniels's eyes lingered on me for just a second too long, and I felt as if he could see through the mask I was wearing. My lips stretched into a brittle smile, but inside I was screaming. "Everything's fine," Alicia repeated, her tone sharp now, a warning buried under sweetness. Marcus gave my shoulder a quick squeeze, like a reminder of what would happen if I dared to contradict her. My heart thudded so hard I thought everyone in that office could hear it. For the first time in years, I wanted to rebel against the chains I had allowed my own family to fasten around me. My hands trembled against the edge of the table as I lowered my gaze, desperate to find a way out. I remembered the years after Samuel's passing, the loneliness that ate at me like a silent disease. My house, once alive with his laughter and the smell of his pipe tobacco, became a hollow tomb. The nights were the hardest. I would sit by the window, watching the streetlights flicker, listening to the echo of silence where his voice used to be. That's when Alicia's calls became more frequent. At first, they comforted me. "Grandma, I don't want you to feel lonely. Come over for dinner." Or, "We need you to watch the baby for the weekend." I felt needed again. Useful again, like my presence mattered. But slowly, those calls shifted. The warmth drained away, replaced by requests that grew heavier each time. A loan for Marcus's failed catering business, money for Alicia's continuing education, even though she already had a degree. They always said it was temporary, but temporary became permanent, and permanent became expectation. I remember one particular evening 2 years ago when Alicia showed up at my door, mascara smeared down her cheeks. "Grandma, the bank is threatening to take our house. Please, if we lose this, where will my son grow up?" She collapsed into my arms like a child again, and I believed her. I gave her $20,000, nearly a third of what I had left, telling myself it was for the boy, for the family. Marcus hugged me too, his cologne sharp and overwhelming, and muttered, "You're a lifesaver." But months passed, and nothing changed. The mortgage was still unpaid, their lifestyle just as extravagant. A new television appeared in their living room. Alicia posted pictures of weekend getaways online, and I sat alone in my modest house, eating soup from a can, my own bills piling up on the counter. Those memories rushed through me now as I sat in that office, pen shaking in my hand. I had built a lifetime on sacrifice. I had sold jewelry that had been in my family for generations. I had worked double shifts when my legs could barely carry me home. I had ignored my own needs, my own health, my own comfort, all because I thought love meant saying yes. But in that moment, with Marcus's grip biting into my shoulder and Alicia's voice whispering poisoned reassurances, I realized I had created a monster. By never setting boundaries, I had taught them that my love was endless currency, to be withdrawn whenever they desired. I glanced up at Mr. Daniels again. His face was calm, professional, but there was something in his eyes, concern, maybe even suspicion. Could I trust him? Could I risk exposing my granddaughter and her husband here, in front of everyone? My chest tightened. The weight of decades of obedience pressed down on me, but beneath it, something small but fierce stirred. A voice I hadn't heard in years. Samuel's voice. "Ellie," he used to say whenever I doubted myself, "you are stronger than you think. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I felt tears prick my eyes, but I forced them back. I couldn't cry now. Not here. I made a choice. My hand slid toward the edge of the document, but instead of signing, I picked up a scrap of paper from the table. One of those small notepads the office kept for signatures and calculations. With trembling fingers, I scribbled a message so quickly my handwriting looked like a child's. "Help me. I'm being forced. Don't let me sign." My pulse raced as I folded the note and slipped it toward Mr. Daniels while Alicia adjusted her hair and Marcus checked the figures on the form. For a second I thought he hadn't noticed, but then his eyes flicked down, scanning the words, and I saw a flash of recognition. He gave the faintest nod, so small that if I had blinked, I would have missed it. Relief flooded me, but fear quickly replaced it. What if they discovered what I had done? What if Marcus saw the note? I imagined his fingers tightening around my shoulder until bruises blossomed, his cold eyes daring me to resist again. My breath grew shallow. I clasped my purse tighter, my knuckles white. But Mr. Daniels was already moving, his voice calm as ever. "Why don't we take a short pause? I'd like to verify a few details in my office before we proceed." His tone was smooth, rehearsed, as if this were routine. Alicia's head snapped up, suspicion flashing across her features. Marcus narrowed his eyes. What's the problem? Everything's in order. Mr. Daniels smiled politely, though I noticed the faint tension in his jaw. It's just bank policy, he said. Transactions of this size require private confirmation. I'll only need Mrs. Harris for a few minutes. His gaze lingered on me again, steady and reassuring, and I knew then that he had understood every desperate word of my note. For the first time in years, I felt something I thought had died with Samuel. Hope. When Mr. Daniels gestured for me to follow him, my legs nearly gave way beneath me. Marcus's grip loosened for the first time since I had sat down, and I felt the pins and needles rush of blood back into my arm. Alicia's hand darted toward mine, her nails digging into my skin, as she whispered harshly through her smile, "Grandma, don't complicate things. Just sign when you get back, please." Her voice was trembling, not with love, but with fear of losing the money, fear of losing control over me. I avoided her gaze. If I looked into her green eyes, I knew I might break. I had spent a lifetime folding under that look, giving in to her pleas, surrendering because I thought it was what mothers and grandmothers were supposed to do. Not this time. Not anymore. The walk to Mr. Daniels's office felt like a march toward judgment. I could feel Marcus's eyes drilling into my back as I shuffled forward, my cane tapping against the polished floor. The security guards had appeared, standing near the desk as if casually. But I noticed how their bodies angled, how their eyes never strayed far from Marcus. Once inside, Mr. Daniels closed the door with a soft click, and for the first time all day, I felt a sliver of safety. His office was small, lined with framed certificates and photos of children in graduation gowns. A smiling wife holding his arm. A cactus sat on the windowsill, its spines sharp, defiant, unyielding. How I longed to be like that cactus. He sat across from me, folded his hands, and spoke gently. "Mrs. Harris, I read your note. Please, tell me exactly what's happening." His voice was calm, but his eyes burned with urgency. The dam inside me broke. Words poured out in a rush, my throat tight, my chest heaving. I told him everything. About the loans I had given over the years, the sacrifices, the manipulations, the way Marcus's hand had bruised my shoulder while Alicia sat and smiled as if nothing was wrong. I told him about the funeral, the life insurance money, the endless promises that were never kept. I told him how ashamed I felt for letting it go this far, for being blind to the truth that my love had become their weapon. Mr. Daniels listened without interrupting, only nodding occasionally, scribbling notes in his pad. When I finished, tears streaked down my face, my voice little more than a rasp. I expected judgment, maybe even disbelief, but what he said instead stunned me. "Mrs. Harris, what you've described is financial coercion, and it can be classified as elder abuse. What your granddaughter and her husband are doing is not only wrong, it's against the law." The word abuse echoed in my mind like a bell tolling in a silent town. Abuse. I had always believed abuse was bruises, broken bones, shouting matches in the middle of the night. I had never thought of manipulation, of endless taking, of pressure wrapped in smiles as abuse. I felt both crushed and liberated. Crushed that the people I loved most had treated me this way, and liberated that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't my fault for being too weak. Maybe I wasn't weak at all. Maybe I had been strong for too long in the wrong direction. "What should I do?" I whispered, clutching the arms of the chair. "She's my granddaughter. I don't want her in trouble, but I can't keep living like this. They'll leave me with nothing." Mr. Daniels leaned forward, his voice steady. "First, we will cancel this transaction. I'll place an alert on your accounts, so no one can attempt something like this again without your explicit, in-person consent and identification. Second, I'll provide you with resources, legal aid, protective services, people trained to help in cases exactly like yours. But the most important part is this. You must decide if you are ready to say no." His words sliced into me sharper than any knife. Ready to say no, could I? For 82 years, I had been the woman who gave, who sacrificed, who said yes to every plea, no matter how unreasonable. To stop now would be to tear down the very identity I had lived by. But as I sat there, I thought of Samuel. I thought of his tired hands, his kind eyes, his endless faith that I was stronger than I believed. I thought of the nights I had skipped dinner so Alicia could have her dream dress for prom. Of the hours I had worked with aching feet so Marcus could buy a car he never paid for himself. And then I thought of Alicia's son, my great-grandson, watching and learning that it was acceptable to bleed your elders dry. If I didn't stop it here, what kind of man would he grow up to be? Yes, I said softly at first, then louder, firmer. Yes, I'm ready. My voice quivered, but it carried a strength I had not heard in decades. Mr. Daniels gave me a small smile, the kind that said he believed me. He began typing into his computer, printing forms, stamping papers with practiced efficiency. As he worked, I sat back in my chair and felt, for the first time in years, the weight of choice returning to me. It was terrifying. It was freeing. Through the window of his office, I could see Alicia pacing in the waiting area, phone pressed to her ear, her face tight with agitation. Marcus sat rigidly, his jaw clenched, tapping his foot against the floor in a steady rhythm of impatience. They knew something was unraveling. They knew their grip on me was slipping. For once, I didn't feel guilty. For once, I didn't feel ashamed. Instead, I felt something I thought I had lost when Samuel was buried. I felt alive. When Mr. Daniels finished his paperwork. He handed me a folder with several documents, his expression calm but firm. These are your copies, Mrs. Harris. Keep them safe. And here he slipped me a small card with his direct number. If they ever pressure you again, call me immediately. You are not alone in this. I clutched the folder as though it were a shield, the card burning in my palm like a key to freedom. For decades I had been defenseless, my worth measured only by what I could give. Now, for the first time, I held proof that someone else saw me, believed me, and was willing to stand by my side. We rose together, and I followed him back toward the lobby. Each step felt like walking into battle. Alicia was waiting near the counter, her phone still in her hand, her voice sharp as she ended the call. When she spotted me, her face lit up with forced cheer, but her eyes betrayed panic. "Grandma, what took so long? We need to finish this and go. We're late already." Marcus stood quickly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. His fists were clenched, though his mouth twisted into a counterfeit smile. I stopped just a few feet away from them, my cane steadying me, the folder pressed tightly against my chest. My heart pounded, but my voice was steady when I said, "I am not going to sign. Alicia, I will not transfer my money." The words echoed through the room, louder than I had intended, sharp enough to turn a few heads from nearby desks. Alicia blinked at me, her mouth hanging open, as if she couldn't comprehend the sentence. For 30 years, every request she had made of me had been answered with obedience. This was the first time I had ever told her no. "Grandma," she whispered, trying to maintain composure for the audience forming around us. "Don't be dramatic, it's just temporary. You'll get the money back." I shook my head, my grip on the folder tightening. "No, it's not temporary. It never has been. It's always been promises you never kept, debts you never paid, excuses you always found. This money is mine, Alicia. I worked for it, I saved it, and I am keeping it." Marcus's jaw hardened, his voice dropping low, venomous. "You're making a mistake, old woman. You think this bank manager will protect you when we walk out of here. You think anyone cares what happens once we leave." He stepped closer, but the 2 security guards immediately moved, their bodies forming a barrier between us. For the first time, he stopped advancing. His eyes narrowed, cold and calculating, as if he were already strategizing his next move. Alicia's tears began to fall, but I knew those tears. They were not the tears of a child who scraped her knee. They were the practiced, calculated tears of a woman who had learned that waterworks could pry open wallets. "I can't believe you're doing this to me, Grandma," she sobbed softly. "After everything we've shared, after all the love we've given you." My throat tightened, but I forced myself to stay firm. "Love," I repeated. my voice trembling with both pain and strength. You call this love. You call it love when your husband leaves bruises on my arm. You call it love when you lie and steal from me under the guise of helping. That is not love, Alicia. That is exploitation. The room had grown quiet. The woman with the brochures paused mid-page. The man with the phone lowered his screen. The clerk at the desk peeked over nervously. For years, my suffering had been invisible. But now, exposed under fluorescent lights, the truth refused to be hidden any longer. Alicia's face crumpled, her tears turning into fury. Fine, she hissed, her mask slipping. Don't give us everything, just half. 10,000 will be enough. We can't survive without it. My chest heaved as I stared at her, my own granddaughter reduced to a beggar of lies. Survive, I said bitterly. You have a house, you have jobs, you have more than I ever did at your age. There is no emergency. There has never been an emergency. You and Marcus have built your life on draining mine. And it ends today. The words came out like fire, cleansing and burning at the same time. For once, I did not apologize. For once, I did not waver. Marcus swore under his breath, his hands twitching at his sides. But with the guards so close, he could do nothing but seethe. Alicia's sobs quieted into ragged breaths, her shoulders slumping under the weight of realization that their plan had collapsed. The silence between us was heavier than any scream, heavier than decades of sacrifice. And for the first time in my long life, I felt the power of my own no. The silence that followed my words was suffocating and liberating all at once. Alicia stood frozen, her lips parted as though she could not comprehend the rebellion that had erupted in front of her. Marcus's jaw flexed, the tendons in his neck straining with the effort to keep his rage contained. I had never seen them so powerless, never watched them falter when confronted with a wall they could not climb. My heart pounded, but instead of fear, I felt strength coursing through me. For decades, I had carried their burdens like a mule beaten down by endless loads, but at that moment, I stood upright. My spine straightened, my cane steady, my voice unshaken. People in the office whispered. A man in a tailored suit muttered something to his colleague. A young teller peeked out from behind the counter, and the older woman with the brochures gave me a small nod, as if silently cheering for me. I realized then that my humiliation had been public. Yes, but so was my victory. They saw me reclaiming what had been stolen from me little by little, not money alone, but dignity, self-worth, and identity. Alicia wiped her tears furiously, her voice lowering to a desperate hiss. Grandma, please, don't do this to us. We can't manage without you. She clutched my arm, softer this time, not with Marcus's bruising strength but with a childlike grip, as if holding on could undo the years of manipulation. I looked at her hand, at the familiar fingers I had once held while teaching her to cross the street. Memories flooded me, her first recital, her laughter as she played in my kitchen, the way she used to curl against me when thunderstorms rattled the windows. And yet, standing there now, I knew those memories had been poisoned by entitlement, twisted by years of my blind devotion. You will manage, I told her softly but firmly, pulling my arm free. You're stronger than you pretend to be. You always were, but you've chosen the easy road, using me as your crutch. That ends today. You'll stand on your own 2 feet, Alicia, not on mine. Her eyes widened, hurt flashing across them. But behind the hurt I saw the truth, fury, resentment, disbelief that her spell over me had broken. Marcus leaned forward, his voice a low growl. You think this little performance saves you? We'll find another way. You can't cut us out. His arrogance still burned, but his posture betrayed unease. The guards loomed closer, their stances protective. For once, he was the one cornered, and I, the frail old woman he had underestimated, had the power. No, Marcus, I said, steadying my voice. You've already had too much of my life. You'll get nothing more. Mr. Daniel stepped between us then, his presence like a shield. That will be enough, he said firmly. Mrs. Harris has made her decision. This matter is closed. His tone carried authority, finality, and I knew that with him and the guards by my side, I was safe for now. Alicia sniffled, turning away, her shoulders shaking as if the performance of her grief had lost its audience. Marcus muttered something under his breath and grabbed her arm, steering her toward the exit. She resisted for a moment, glaring back at me with eyes that still searched for weakness, but I refused to look away. I met her stare head-on until she turned and stormed out, the glass doors swinging shut behind them. The office breathed again. Conversations resumed, papers shuffled. The hum of printers filled the silence they had left. But inside me, nothing was the same. I sank into a chair, my legs trembling not from fear but from the release of years of suppressed pain. My hand shook as I placed the folder into my purse, but my heart was steady. I had finally said no, and the world had not ended. In fact, for the first time in decades, the world felt like it belonged to me again. Mr. Daniels knelt beside my chair, lowering his voice so only I could hear. "You did the right thing, Mrs. Harris. It's not easy, but you've taken the first step. Now it's time to protect yourself moving forward." His words sank deep, settling into a part of me that had been empty for too long. Protect myself. I had spent 82 years protecting everyone else, but I had forgotten that I deserved protection too, even from my own family. As I left the bank that day, supported gently by one of the guards, the air outside felt different. The sunlight seemed warmer, the street noises sharper, as if the world itself had been muted all those years, and now played at full volume. I breathed in, long and deep, letting the crispness of the day fill my lungs. My body was frail, yes, but inside I felt something stronger than youth, freedom. I had broken the cycle. When I arrived home that evening, the silence of my small house greeted me like an old companion. For years, that silence had been a prison, a reminder of Samuel's absence and the echo of my own loneliness. But that night, it sounded different, less like emptiness, more like space. Space that was finally mine, not crowded by guilt or suffocated by endless demands. I set my purse on the table and lowered myself into my favorite chair, the one with worn arms and a cushion that sagged under my weight, and I let the events of the day replay in my mind. My granddaughter's face, streaked with fake tears, Marcus's cold glare, the sound of my own voice steady, unwavering, saying no for the first time. It was surreal, as if another woman had spoken through me, a woman I had buried long ago, under layers of sacrifice. I thought back over the decades, tracing the path that had led me here. When Samuel and I were young, we dreamed small but steady dreams, a modest home, a savings account that would keep us comfortable in old age, time together in our twilight years. We worked for every cent, tightening belts, patching clothes, cooking at home instead of eating out. We raised our sons with the same values, and when they grew up and built their own lives, I thought perhaps our sacrifices had paid off. But when Alicia came along, she became the sun around which my world revolved. I showered her with the love I thought she needed, and when she discovered that tears and pleading could unlock my wallet, I never corrected her. Every time I said yes, I believed I was buying her happiness, buying her security. In truth, I was selling pieces of myself. It is painful to admit, but I enabled her. I allowed Marcus into our lives even when every instinct told me to be wary. I ignored Samuel's warnings, silenced my own doubts, and justified it all by calling it love. But what is love when it demands that you empty yourself until nothing remains? I had confused sacrifice with devotion, mistaking exploitation for affection, and the cost had been enormous. Not only in money, though that, too, had been drained, but in dignity, in independence, in the confidence to stand tall as the woman I once was. As I sat in the quiet of my home, I remembered Samuel's final months. His heart was failing, and every visit to the doctor was another bill we could barely pay. I begged Alicia for help then, begged her to contribute something, anything. She had smiled apologetically and said, "Grandma, we're struggling too. You understand, don't you?" I did understand, or rather, I convinced myself I did. I told myself it was my responsibility to shoulder the weight. Now, years later, the anger welled up in me, not just at her, but at myself. I had robbed Samuel of peace in his final days by funneling our security into Alicia's endless demands. That was the heaviest sin of all. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, each sound reminding me that time was slipping away, that I had fewer years ahead than behind. But instead of despair, I felt determination. I could not change the past, but I could reclaim what remained of my future. I thought of the resources Mr. Daniels had given me, the hotline, the pamphlets, the phone number written neatly on his card. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel ashamed to use them. Asking for help wasn't weakness. No, weakness was allowing myself to be drained until I was empty. Strength was saying enough. I poured myself a cup of tea, my hands still trembling slightly, and as the steam rose into my face, I whispered out loud, "It ends now." I said it again, louder this time, my voice bouncing off the walls. "It ends now." It felt like a declaration, not just to myself but to the ghosts of my past mistakes. The Eleanor who had always said yes was gone. In her place stood an old woman who had finally learned that love without respect is not love at all. That family without boundaries is poison. And that no one, no matter how dear, had the right to take my life's work away from me. The following morning, I woke before the sun, my body stiff from age but my mind restless with clarity. I sat by the window with my cup of tea, watching the world outside slowly awaken. The street was quiet, the air cool, the first rays of light stretching across the roofs like cautious fingers. For years, mornings had been heavy for me, filled with dread of phone calls or knocks at the door, Alicia's voice echoing with yet another request. But that morning, for the first time in decades, I felt anticipation instead of fear. I wasn't sure what the day would bring, but I knew it would be mine to shape. I took out the folder Mr. Daniels had given me, spreading the papers across my small table. Protective services information, financial security tips, phone numbers for legal aid and support groups. Each document represented something I had never given myself permission to seek: protection. I traced the bold print of the hotline number with my finger, and a strange warmth filled my chest. I realized that, all this time, I had believed I had to face life alone, that asking for help would be shameful, proof of weakness. But no, it was my silence that had left me vulnerable, my refusal to admit the truth that had kept me chained. As I thought about Alicia and Marcus, a storm of emotions rose inside me. Anger, yes, anger, at their audacity, at their entitlement, at the bruises Marcus had left on my body, and the scars Alicia had left on my heart. But there was sorrow too. Sorrow that the little girl I once rocked to sleep had grown into someone who could betray me so coldly. I wondered if I had failed her somehow, if my endless giving had taught her that love was measured only by how much you could take from another. The thought stung, but I reminded myself that guilt was another chain, and I was done wearing chains. I decided then that I would not wait for them to call, not wait for the next plea, or the next scheme. I would draw my boundaries clearly, not only with words, but with actions. I would change my phone number, secure my accounts, and if necessary, file a report. For 82 years, I had been the foundation others walked upon, but now I would build walls where they were needed. Not walls of bitterness, no. I still loved Alicia, though it was a love tinged with deep disappointment, but walls of self-respect. If she wanted a relationship with me, it would be on new terms. If she could not accept those terms, then perhaps distance would be the only cure. That day, I called the hotline. My hands trembled as I dialed, but when a calm voice answered and said, "You are not alone," my tears flowed freely. I explained my situation, my age, my history, the coercion at the bank. The woman on the other end listened with patience, validating every word, offering resources and reassurance. When the call ended, I felt lighter, as if a weight I had carried on my shoulders for decades had finally been lifted by someone willing to share the burden. Later, I went to the small park near my home, the one Samuel and I used to visit on Sundays. Children played on the swings, their laughter carried by the breeze, and I sat on a bench, letting the sound remind me that innocence still existed in the world. A young mother pushed her daughter gently, smiling with a kind of warmth that was free of calculation. and I realized that not all love is selfish. There are still purer versions of it, untainted and real. I vowed to fill the rest of my days seeking that kind of love, not the manipulative demands of those who drained me, but the simple, genuine kindness of human connection. As the sun dipped lower, I whispered to Samuel, as I often did when I felt lost, "I'm learning, love. I'm learning to say no, to protect myself. I think you'd be proud of me." A breeze rustled the leaves above, and for a fleeting moment, I felt his presence, steady and approving, as though he were telling me once again, "Ellie, you're stronger than you think." It didn't take long for the test to arrive. 2 days after the incident at the bank, my phone rang. I stared at the caller ID, Alicia's name glowing on the screen like a warning light. My pulse quickened, and for a moment, the old reflex tugged at me. Answer quickly. Soothe her. Fix whatever crisis she was about to lay at my feet. But I forced myself to sit still, to let it ring twice before I picked up. When I finally pressed the button, I did so not with trembling fear, but with the steady resolve of someone who had decided that things would never again be the same. "Grandma," Alicia's voice cracked with practiced desperation. "Please, listen. Marcus is furious. He says you embarrassed us, and now the mortgage company is threatening to take the house. If you could just help us this one last time, just 15,000, we'll pay you back. I swear. We'll even write a contract this time. Please, Grandma, think of my son. He can't lose his home." The words hit me with their familiar rhythm, the same cadence she had used since she was a girl. Tears, urgency, guilt, and always the mention of her child. For a moment, my heart wavered. Images of that boy, my great-grandson, flashed through my mind. His bright smile, the way his hand felt small and warm in mine. But then, just as quickly, I remembered Samuel's tired eyes, the years of sleepless nights, the empty accounts, the bruise on my shoulder from Marcus's grip. I closed my eyes and drew a long breath. "No, Alicia," I said firmly. "I will not give you another penny. The house, the mortgage, your husband's temper, those are not my responsibilities. I raised my children. I worked my years. I am 82 years old, and I deserve peace." The silence on the other end was sharp and dangerous, like glass about to shatter. Her voice, when it came, was no longer soft or pleading. It was hard, sharp with venom. "So you're just going to let us drown? After everything we've done for you? After all the love we've given you? You're turning your back on your family?" The anger in me rose, but it was not the old anger of helplessness. It was clean, strong, like a flame that burns away rot. Family doesn't hold your arm until it bruises. Family doesn't trick you into signing away your savings. Family doesn't drain you dry and call it love. If you believe that's what family is, then you've forgotten everything I tried to teach you. My hand shook as I gripped the phone tighter, but my voice did not falter. "I love you, Alicia, but love without respect is poison. And I will not drink poison anymore." There was a hiss of breath on the other end, followed by Marcus's muffled voice in the background, his tone sharp and commanding. Alicia said something hurriedly to him, then returned to the phone. Her voice cracked again, this time with real fury. "Fine. Keep your money. Don't expect us to visit. Don't expect my son to call you Grandma anymore. You've made your choice." And then the line went dead. I sat in the quiet, the phone heavy in my hand, my heart pounding. For years, that kind of threat would have shattered me. The thought of losing Alicia's affection, of being cut off from my great-grandson, would have driven me to cave in, to hand over whatever they asked just to preserve a fragile illusion of family. But this time, I felt something different. I felt grief, yes, sharp and aching. But beneath the grief, I felt relief. For the first time in decades, I had chosen myself. Tears slid down my cheeks, not from weakness but from release. I whispered into the silence, as if Alicia could somehow still hear me. "I will always love you, child, but I will not be your victim anymore." The weight lifted, and I leaned back in my chair, exhausted but unbroken. Outside, the sun streamed through the curtains, warm against my skin, a reminder that life still offered light, even after the darkest storms. The days that followed were not easy. My phone remained quiet. No more calls, no more sudden knocks at the door, no messages asking for help or demanding money. At first, the silence felt like abandonment, like standing in an empty church long after the choir had gone home. I would catch myself glancing at the phone, half expecting Alicia to call again with softer words, maybe even an apology. But the days stretched on, and nothing came. I had lost something, yes, but I had also gained something far greater: peace. For the first time in years, I slept through the night without waking in dread of what tomorrow's request might be. I began filling my days with things I had long neglected. I returned to the library where I used to spend hours before life became so heavy, running my fingers across the spines of books like old friends. I joined a group of women at the senior center who met weekly to share stories and laughter over cups of coffee. At first, I sat quietly, listening, unsure if I still knew how to belong without the weight of someone else's needs crushing me. But slowly, I found my voice again. I told them pieces of my story, and their eyes filled with recognition, with compassion, with the silent agreement of women who had carried too much for too long. I walked in the park more often, taking slower steps but savoring each one, and when children ran past me with laughter spilling from their lungs, I smiled instead of aching. I realized then that I still had love to give, but I could choose where to place it. I didn't have to pour it into a bottomless well of manipulation. I could give it to people who saw me, respected me, cherished me not for what I could provide but for who I was. One afternoon, I sat by my window with a journal in my lap, something I had not touched in years. The pages were blank, waiting, and as the pen touched paper, I began to write, not about money, not about regret, but about resilience, about lessons learned, too late but not wasted. I wrote about Samuel, about his steady strength, about the way he had believed in me when I could not. I wrote about the little girl Alicia once was, and how I hoped she might one day find her way back to that innocence. I wrote about myself, Eleanor Harris, 82 years old, finally discovering that boundaries are not walls that keep love out, but gates that protect it from being trampled. Do I still hurt? Yes. The wound of betrayal runs deep, and healing will take time, but I no longer feel powerless. I no longer feel like a vessel to be emptied. I feel like a woman who has survived storms and is now standing on solid ground. If Alicia never calls again, I will mourn, but I will not collapse. And if she does call, the answer will be different. It will not be the endless yes she once relied on. It will be a thoughtful, measured response from a woman who knows her worth. As I finish telling you this story, I want you to understand something. No matter your age, no matter how long you've been told that your duty is only to give, you have the right to draw the line. You have the right to protect your peace. You have the right to say no. If my story resonates with you, if you too have carried the heavy weight of always saying yes, know that it is never too late to reclaim your voice. And before I close, I want to ask something of you: not money, not sacrifice, but your presence here with me. If you felt strength in my words, if you found a piece of yourself in my journey, please subscribe to this channel. Become part of this community where our stories matter, where our voices are heard, where none of us are truly alone. Share your own experiences in the comments. Tell us what you've endured, what you've learned, what battles you've fought in silence. Let this be a place where healing begins, not with shame, but with honesty. And if this video touched you, let me know what you took from it, what it made you feel. Your words may be the light someone else needs to find their way out of the darkness. So, my dear friends, thank you for walking with me through this painful but necessary journey. Together, let us create a circle of strength, a circle of truth, and a circle of love, the kind of love that heals instead of drains.